If you feel like you're disconnected from Black Ops 6, slow to react, or just feeling out of sync with the game, you're not alone. Not only is this something most players are feeling right now, it's also something some of the pros are feeling right now. Call of Duty, in their infinite wisdom, have decided that the only way to make this game feel responsive and feel reactive is by burying yourself in several thousand menus. And unfortunately, when it comes to movement and aiming, there is a lot of snake oil on the internet, and I've seen some pretty outrageous posts telling people to enable settings that objectively make your game worse. Or even just changing settings that don't actually change anything at all. I mean, I saw a whole post about changing a motion sensor setting whilst motion sensor aiming was turned off, so the whole post was redundant. Because we live in the lovely era of misinformation and snake oil on the internet, I decided to do all of the testing myself, not only in the firing range, but also in private matches, to find out how you can get the best controller settings, the stickiest aim, the fastest movement, and catch up to your opponents in game. And there are a bunch of secret settings that are buried in the menus that can greatly improve the feel and responsiveness of how Black Ops 6 works, and I'll be explaining all of that in this video today. The general problem with Black Ops 6 is that although movement speed is nearly the same compared to something like Modern Warfare 3, the ability to switch direction of your motion is faster than any COD before, except for some of the jetpack CODs. And that means more motion and more players zigzagging and darting on your screen, and much harder tracking. Not only will I show you the settings to outmaneuver your opponents, but also how to out-aim your opponents. Please do drop a like on this video if you find it useful, subscribe as well, we're really on the road to 200k, and share it to your friends if they're struggling too. A lot of the settings I'm going to show you work for both motion and for aiming, so we're going to go at it page by page, because I feel that's most efficient. Now, all of these settings work in combination with each other to achieve effectively a fluid motion and better and stickier aiming. Now, the first one here, obviously, is your sensitivity. And on the sensitivity factor, I personally recommend anywhere between 8.8 and 12.12. I personally play on the higher end of that, but every setting I'm going to show you is going to be scalable to whatever sensitivity you feel comfortable with. So if 8.8 to 12.12 feels a little bit intimidating, don't worry, you can still start at your own sensitivity and potentially work your way upwards. The first big setting in terms of getting the best motion and the best aim comes into your dead zones. Now, on your dead zones, you want on your left stick a very low minimum before introducing drift, and you can see whether or not you have stick drift based on this little testing tool, which is very handy to have. And then on your left stick maximum, you actually want this down as low as 70. And the reason for this is because having it really low in around the 70 to 65 region is going to get rid of dead slides and bad dives. So if you've ever had a situation where you've tried initiating a slide and it just doesn't work, this setting is going to fix that. It's going to be a really big improvement to your general fluidity of movement, and I highly recommend everyone does it. But the same also applies to your right stick aiming. And the reason for that is because we're seeing more motion than ever before in any kind of Call of Duty in terms of directional motion. So to compensate for that, scaling down the maximum dead zone is a really important step. This means that you can snap left and right a lot quicker, and then you can compensate for those shots even faster from the center of the stick. This is a really good setting that's going to fix a lot of your trouble, and I highly recommend dropping it to the 85 segment. On the aiming page, this is where things get interesting, and the first big setting is your sensitivity multiplier. I recommend dropping your ADS sensitivity multiplier down to 0.8, and this is going to work in tangent with another setting I'm going to show you to give you snappy aim left and right, but better recoil compensation and micro adjustments on distant targets. It's a really important step to getting fast movement left and right, but also under control aiming. The next big thing in the advanced aiming tab is not only looking at changing your ADS sensitivity transition to instant, but also your aim response curve being dynamic. Dynamic is what every professional uses. It's going to give you the best snappiness left and right to targets, and it's the closest you're going to get to mouse-like aiming. But the big setting, and one that nobody has really spoken about, and one that I have personally tested in a lot of different ways, is the aim response curve slope scale, and dropping this down to around 0.8 or even 0.7 is going to create a really nice middle ground between snappy aim and decent micro adjustments for compensation on recoil. Now, I've personally tested all of this at different levels to find the best balance, and I think 0.8 works the best, and this basically takes away some of the general floatiness that people feel when using a dynamic response curve. Some players who have never used it before find it to be a little bit intimidating. This setting makes it much more bearable and, in my opinion, also much more accurate. On the movement tab, this is something that's really key. We want sprint assist on, and if you show more, you want the delay set to 0, and sprint assist sideways and backwards to be enabled. But the big setting, and this applies under the advanced movement settings that you'll find down here in movement advanced, is actually that you want tactical sprint activation set to single tap run. Now, this is going to change whether you're a multiplayer player or a Black Ops 6 Warzone player. Personally, for Black Ops 6 multiplayer, where sprint to fire times are radically faster than tactical sprint to fire times, you just want sprint assist set to on with single tap under tactical sprint activation. But if you're going into Warzone, you probably want sprint assist set to full tactical sprint assist to get the most out of the general mobility in the game. These settings work really well together, they create a really mobile system, and I think you'll like what you're going to see. I want to show you guys all together what these settings hopefully achieve for you in-game. Now granted, I'm on 12/12 cents, so this might look a little bit different for you depending on your sensitivity scale, but the goal here is to manipulate not only the aim assist that you're seeing over range, which as you can tell, I'm not even touching my right stick right now, and you can see that this game is pretty intent on making sure that I hit certain targets. But if I do touch my right stick, in together, we can create a pretty much full fluid motion that guarantees certain reactions. Now, as you can see, sliding left and right is super easy with these settings because we've reduced that dead zone, and that means you're getting less dead motions, more ability to move in and out of cover as fast as you humanly want. But what's really critical is that when we do get down to business, the compensation for aiming is really straightforward. Now, granted, the XM4 doesn't have a huge amount of recoil, but I'm not going to show you any recoil compensation other than just simply having a lower dead zone. So that's with 0 right stick input. I have not touched my aiming stick. When I combine that with a little bit of compensation, it's pretty much a laser beam. When you combine your left stick, your right stick, and a small amount of recoil compensation, you can really get weapons that hit effectively, even when you're sliding in and out of movement. And the great thing about these settings is what you get from a dynamic response curve is the ability to snap left and right, but when the aiming kicks in, it gets a lot slower, it gets a lot more controllable. So you're going to see the aim assist latch onto a couple of these targets down the range here, but if I snap quickly left and quickly right, you can see that I can cover most of my screen distance in a very short space of time. But if I want to really lock in on an opponent, it's pretty straightforward. It does slow down when you hit that ADS because we've changed a couple of settings on that front, and also because of the dynamic response curve and how it works generally, snapping in and out of targets gets the job done. Now, the big issue with why Black Ops 6 feels so unresponsive for the vast majority of you is because the reality of Black Ops 6 is that it's not just about right stick aiming anymore. You're almost inadvertently aiming with your movement stick at the same time. Because characters are also moving in tangent with you, you kind of have to keep track of them in more ways than one. And this setting generally is going to give you the best options to get this done. I think right now there is no better setting than the settings that I've shown you. I think this is pretty much the secret sauce to aiming and shooting, and I would not be surprised to see CDL pros adopting similar settings in the not too distant future. Now, if you found this video really useful, folks, please just drop a like and consider subscribing. We're on the road to 200k. And if you want more information, or if there's anything that you're struggling with in Black Ops 6, I really want to understand it down below. For me personally, as a content creator, I want to bring you guys content and footage that actually helps you get better at the game and actually improves your general gameplay for Black Ops 6. But the only way I can do that is by finding out what you're actually struggling with in game, and I think this is a great first step. This aiming situation, the stickiness that you're seeing right now, even as I just sort of rotate around this target, is really going to improve the general gameplay flow for a lot of you. One thing I should also mention generally, and something that I guess most people are missing out on, is that in your settings, especially around your graphics settings under view, your FOV does have a big role to play on your general feel of aim. The higher the FOV with affected enable, the less you're going to notice things like visual recoil. And that's why you're generally seeing less recoil across the board from content creators and streamers, because a lot of us have our FOV cranked as high as humanly possible. So folks, hope you found this useful, hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, make sure to drop a like, consider subscribing on the road to 200k, and I'll see you again in the next one.